entire lesson. I studied a lot this week, and I'm very excited to share with you some of the weird things I found, or not really weird, but things that we really don't think about at this point in the Scriptures. We're talking about the life of Paul, and last week what we did is we've already had him converted. We've already had him see the vision, go talk to Ananias, and then go down to Jerusalem and start dealing with those people. And then he had an argument with the Hellenistic Jews, and the members of the way said, okay, we kind of might need to get you out of town. And so this is where we left off. We're leaving off where the Jewish leaders of the Jerusalem church says it's time to go. And so where does he do? Where does he go? He boards a boat for Tarsus. Here's the best question. Why Tarsus?
Because that's his home.
It's his home. He was born in Tarsus. He lived there. And when you're trying to escape from something that is kind of unnerving or kind of scary, you always go home. And so they kind of said, maybe you need to go home. And I'm sorry, we won't look at this scripture, but Galatians 1:21 states that Paul went through Syria and went through Cilicia. And I have a map to show you in just a second where these two places are. The map that I gave you has part of it, but I didn't label right on that one, these two parts. And Saul kind of disappears from the Bible for about 5 years. I think it's kind of interesting that here we have certain parts of Saul's life. We see when he gets converted on the road to Damascus, he goes into the desert, and he stays there from 1 to 3 years, and then he comes back and starts preaching in Damascus. They run him out of Damascus. He goes down to Jerusalem, and the members of the way say, okay, we accept you. He talks with them for 15 days, and then all of a sudden, we don't know what happens to him for 5 years. But I can tell you, lots of things occur in God's plan. There are lots of things that God is setting forth that will help Saul in the long run. So here's our map, okay? And we have Jerusalem right here, and he travels through Syria, or Caesarea, and Syria right here. Then he boards the boat back up to Tarsus. Tarsus is found in modern-day Turkey. So this will kind of get you an idea. He kind of likes to go in that little pattern over and over again until God really calls him on this missionary journey. So that's where we are. He's back in Tarsus. We're going to leave him alone for a little while, and we're going to talk about, well, what happened in those 5 years? Because there's a lot of things that took place here. Acts 9 and 16. So let's look at Acts 9 and 16 in our Bibles.
Page 224.
Page 224.
In the New Testament.
Acts 9 and 16. And would you like to go ahead and read that for us?
Yes.
Acts 9 and 16.
大家翻开224页，在使徒行传第9章16节说到：“我也要指示他为我的名必须受许多的苦难。”
All right. So Acts 9 and 16 is very simple. It says, in English it says, I will show him how many things he must suffer for my name's sake. So all of these things I'm going to talk about right now are things that we think might have happened to Saul during this 5-year period. The first one is, God told him, you're going to have to learn that there's going to be times you're going to suffer. There's going to be things that are going to happen to you, and they're not going to be so pleasant. And that's something that we all have to understand as Christians. Just because we are saved doesn't mean we're going to live this nice, rosy life with no problems.
我们被拯救了以后，不代表我们会是过着很快乐的生活。
We've got to learn how to deal with God and understand God's purpose for our life.
了解神对我们一生的目的是什么。
And if we consider everything that Saul, going to be Paul, very shortly, we're almost to the Paul part, But what Saul was going to have to go through, he really had to understand what it meant to take a stand for Christ. And that's something that doesn't happen just like that. It takes time. And I think God's purpose for him staying out of the scene for 5 years was so that he could learn that.
为什么神让扫罗离开这里面的时间没有出现在圣经里面？神要扫罗学一些事。
So, what can we say about it? Saul enters his hometown of Tarsus. And it's like, okay, we know he went back into Tarsus. And let's think through this. When the last time he was in Tarsus, do you remember what he was?
他在到那之前是什么？
He was a Pharisee.
他是一个法利赛人。
He was a highly respected Pharisee. And he was going down to Jerusalem to do what? Capture the people of the way and put them to death. That's the last they'd ever heard of Saul.
在当初的时候，其实扫罗那个时候是一个法利赛人，他要去逮捕那些信耶稣的人。
So can you imagine what it would be like if you left, I'm going to kill these people. I'm going to wrap them up. I'm going to do something to take care of them. And what does he do? He returns as a follower of the people who he's
当时他说我要
persecuting.
杀了那些跟随耶稣的人，结果这次回来他说我成为耶稣的跟随者。你觉得呢？
Have you ever had people do that to you before? They say, oh, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. They leave, and the next time you see them, they're doing exactly the opposite. What kind of things, what kind of feelings or thoughts might you have with people that do that? Yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it? And I call them like ping pong people. All of y'all know how to play ping pong. You hit them, you go over here, hit them, come back. And it's like, okay, I started over here, now I'm over here. Am I going to come back here or am I going to go back there? And people are going to go, what's wrong with you? Now, let's dig a little deeper though. He left as a Pharisee. He left as the ultimate person in the law. Right? Now, he is the person who is going to do away with that law and say what's wrong with it. How do you think Mama and Daddy are going to feel about that? That's a lot of things. Now, you're right, William. We really don't know, but you can only imagine because according to Orthodox Jewish tradition, if you step out of the faith, you're considered a defector. And worse, they consider all defectors as being dead. So what would you think in Saul's life that this might have happened? His parents might have said, I don't know you, you're dead. You're going to have to go somewhere else because you aren't believing the way I believe.
他回到大树的时候，他的父母会说：“你就像死了一样，因为你是叛徒，你叛教了，所以你要回去。”
Wouldn't you imagine that would be kind of like really low as far as Paul's or Saul's feeling with his family? We really don't know, but we do know according to Jewish tradition, that's what happens to them. They're shunned by the family. They are totally told, we cannot have anything to do with you anymore. So Saul might have not had a family anymore.
所以当时，也许当时扫罗就已经没有家人了。
So now we're going to leave Saul alone for 5 years in that scenario. Isn't that a nice situation to be in? No. But remember, Jesus said that Saul or Paul was going to have to learn to do what? Suffer. So, we leave it. Time passes. And in 2 Corinthians, and we don't have time to look at this either, but 2 Corinthians 24 and 26 suggests some of the things that might have happened to him in that time. But we're just going to leave it right there, and in your own time you can read, because I've got so much material to cover today. But, did the way, or the movement called the Way, die because Saul left Jerusalem? No, there was a lot of other people there. Remember, the apostles were still in Jerusalem.
使徒还是一直在耶路撒冷。
They were still preaching and teaching the good news of Jesus Christ.
他们仍然在传扬耶稣基督。
So let's look at what happens in this 5-year period.
所以我们看这5年当中发生了什么事。
And let's look at this scripture. We covered it like 3 weeks ago when we were talking about a different part. But dig a little deeper into Acts 8:1. And that's found on what page?
221.
221.
21页，
Go ahead and read that for us, Nina.
我来看第8章第1节哦，这里说到，从这日起，耶路撒冷的教会大遭逼迫，除了使徒以外，门徒都分散在犹太和撒玛利亚各处。
So when we look at this, then we know that a severe persecution outbreaks in Jerusalem. Let's think this through. And I just went, oh, this is the stuff that really makes me excited because I think this is really bad. These people are going to be put to death. But guess what happens? Something very miraculous happens. In that, the apostles stay in Jerusalem. And remember, who was the first martyr? First person who was killed? Stephen. Okay? Stephen was with a group of men that were called either the elders or the deacons of the church. According to what everybody can read and find out about this period, when Stephen was killed, the apostles stayed, the deacons or the elders went out and started evangelizing. Now, isn't that kind of interesting? Because you would think that the apostles would go out and the deacons would stay there. No, it was the other way around. The apostles stayed, the deacons went out and started going to all parts of the world.
当史提反被杀的时候，使徒就留着，变成执事们出去外面传福音。
And they became very dynamic in what they were spreading about the good news. And if we had time, I would tell you about 1 or 2 of them. But one of the ones that I can tell you about as far as one of those deacons or elders who went out was called Philip. And Philip in the Ethiopian eunuch, he was that person. And we don't find at this time any mention of the apostles going out to any parts of the land. We always read about Philip. And we read about the others who went out.
这个时候我们都没有读到使徒，这个时候去外面传福音，我们反而是读到这些第一可能只是他们比如腓力啊，他在传福音。
And that's what I find so fascinating. Because just when people say, this is over with, there's going to be a new movement and a new way. And so let's look. Also, here's my map. And that's the map you have there that I ran off for you so you can see how everything moved. We do know, let me point out some things for you. Here's Tarsus up here. Here's Cyprus. Here is Cilicia that they mentioned. And here's Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria. Let's look at the arrows, okay? So we have Saul. He goes back to Tarsus. Don't think that Saul didn't tell anybody about Jesus on his way back home. I guarantee you, he could not stop talking about what had happened to him. So, in this instance, we have Saul going up here, going across to Cyprus, up to Tarsus. And I bet you people started believing in God. That's one. Then we have the movement of this direction. We have Philip the evangelist who goes down here.
腓力在埃及去传福音。
And the story of the Ethiopian eunuch happens in this area. And that's what blows my mind. I always thought it happened over here. No, it was over here. As Philip was going south into South Egypt. We do not know which ones, I couldn't find, but we do know that some of them traveled all the way to Cyrene. Cyrene is modern day Libya. So because of that persecution in Acts 8:1, look what happens. It spreads like wildfire. And it goes in opposite directions. So much so, then look at what this says, because we have some scripture that says, this man traveled to here, and 2 men traveled to Antioch. Now here's the really cool part. And this is the part of it, oh, this is my geek coming out in me. Why? Why did these people travel in that direction?
为什么这些人往这个地方传福音？为什么？
Why did they move in that direction? These were the major trade routes during this time period. So if you wanted to buy and sell goods, these are the ways you traveled. Now, can you think of the impact these people going in this direction, buying, selling, and trading would do to this area? What do you think here? It was commonly known that ships would travel from here to here. Then, Cyprus also had people coming from this area up here, and they would always go up here and go around the mountain range to Tarsus. That's why all of a sudden the word Antioch appears in the Bible. It was because two men, one from Cyrene and one from Cyprus, travels to Antioch. Why? It's a trade route. It's in the Bible. Get there in just a second. So let's talk about God's movement then. So let's look at Acts 11, and this is where we start finding out these people. Acts 11, and we're going to look at verses 19 through 21.
在229页11章19节到23节。
Go ahead.
我们来看19节，这里说到，那些因尸体反的事遭患难四散的门徒，只走到腓尼基和塞浦路斯并安提阿。他们不向别人讲道，只向犹太人讲。但内中有塞浦路斯和古利赛人和古利奈人，他们到了安提阿，也向希腊人传讲主耶稣。主与他们同在，信而归主的人就很多了。
There you go. That's why we landed in Antioch. It says here that because of the persecution, it scattered, and they only talked to Jews. Remember the book of James? That was a problem, that James was really concerned with just the Jews. Well, this movement was still just basically Jewish. And then all of a sudden, look at verse 20. It says, some of the men who were from Cyprus and Cyrene, the trade route, goes to Antioch and says, it's not just for Jews only. It's for the Gentiles. Look how different that was. Because it says, look at verse 21. It says, and the hand of the Lord was with them, and a great number of them turned to the Lord. And the Bible translations I've read and studied, they said maybe only just two men started it, or it could have been a group of men. But they went together, and they went to Antioch, and they started doing this. And these are some of the terms that we talk about a lot about this one area. Remember the book of James? And we started out on James 1:1, and we said it was to the 12 tribes scattered. This is where the scattering started. Okay? If it wasn't scattered here, there was earlier persecutions, and these Jews were everywhere. But now, the scattered has a purpose, because now they were scattered so they could start believing in Jesus.
为什么这犹太人会分散在各地呢？因为他们要传扬神的福音。
So, the word scattered in the Bible is from the Greek word, I did this just for you, Mike, hispiero, which means sow. You just scatter seeds from here to there. That's all it means. We're just scattering things. And it's amazing what you being here does. Because we are doing the same thing right in this room right now. It's kind of exciting. Because you never know what kind of fruit we're going to have. But it's awesome. Also it says, two men saw God working. And that's the thing that you need to understand. These two men went into Antioch and said, God's moving upon these people to believe in God. We need to do what God's brought us here. And when you see God working and you join what He's doing, guess what happens? It multiplies. And a lot of people in Antioch started believing in God.
这两个人来到安提阿，发现神在这些人身上做工，他就进入神的工作里面，发现这些门徒就被这里。
Now, isn't that exciting? Saul has nothing to do with it. The apostles have nothing else. It was a group of men or two men who believed and said, hey, these people need God also. And so they proclaimed. And the Gentile response was tremendous. All of a sudden, there was a bunch of people in Antioch believing in God.
在安提阿忽然间有很多非犹太人，或非犹太人就是 Gentile，就是外邦人，他们也来相信耶稣。
Now, I got a question to ask you. How many of you like to gossip?
有人有八卦的。
Do you know what gossip is? Not you. But does everybody understand what gossiping does? You just kind of talk, you know. Well, did you hear about so-and-so? Did you hear about so-and-so? Well, I guarantee you this is a good piece of gossip. Antioch is not in Jerusalem. Antioch's way up there. And I think I have how many kilometers it is. But Antioch's up here, the people in Jerusalem down here, and they go, God's moving up there.
所以耶路撒冷人就想说，哇，神也在安提阿这些外邦人身上工作吗？因为他们原本以为是福音只传给犹太人，他们以为
We don't know what's going on up in Antioch. We might need to check it out. Because it might be just a rumor that God is working where we didn't send anybody.
因为他们没有派人去传福音啊，他们就听到谣言说，哦，这边有一群人也信主。
So let's look at Acts 11, 22 through 24.
22节到24节。好，我来念好，在19章的部分说到，这风声传到耶路撒冷教会人的耳中，他们就打发巴拿巴出去，走到安提阿为止。他到那里看见神所赐的恩，就欢喜，劝勉众人立定心志，很久靠主。这巴拿巴原是个好人，被圣灵充满，大有信心，于是有许多人归服喜乐主。
All right, so here we go. We've heard something's going on in Antioch. Something's happening in Antioch. Should we send somebody? And guess who they sent?
Oh.
No, not yet. Not yet. They sent, Antioch was 483 kilometers north of Jerusalem. Okay? That's how far away it was. And what did they do? They sent Barnabas to say, hey, go up to Antioch and find out what's going on up there. Who was Barnabas?
Stood up for Saul.
The man who stood up for Saul. Now, is that a coincidence or is that God's plan? Because look how far Tarsus was away from Antioch. Look at your map. There was a reason why Barnabas was sent up there. It's not that far away. And Saul had been, as far as we know, not doing much for 5 years. The spread goes to Antioch and they go, Barnabas says, I'll go. And they want to find verification that God was moving up in Antioch. Barnabas saw the evidence of the grace of God. I guarantee you he was excited. Remember what Barnabas' name means? The encourager. And when he sees something good, he wants to tell other people about it. Isn't that what we should all do? If something good happens to Vicky, don't we want everybody to know how good it is? That's only human nature. So all of a sudden we have Barnabas in another situation. The first one, Barnabas had to defend Saul to the church of Jerusalem. Of all people, Saul. Now all of a sudden, we have a rumor up north that something's going on. Let's go send the encourager. Let's see what he brings back. So why Barnabas? Let's look at 11:25 then. There's a lot in that one scripture right there. He went straight for the person that he knew that could handle this situation. A person who was a master at debating the law. He knew the Pharisaical law. He knew all the trials and tribulations. And earlier we talked that Saul knew all these different languages. He did not only speak Greek and Hebrew, Aramaic, Latin. He had to have spoken all these different languages. What more to go speak to all of these people who could speak all these different languages?
他去找扫罗，因为扫罗是法利赛人中很有知识的，他有很多语言他都知道。
So Barnabas, he encouraged the people at Antioch. I guarantee you, if he encouraged Saul, and he encouraged Saul to do what he had to do while they were together, and Saul went back, he would be doing that for everybody. Typically, people who are good and encourage people, they encourage other people. They don't go, Nina, I don't like you, so I'm not going to encourage you. Oh, Eric, I'm going to encourage you. Nina, I'm still not encouraging you. Oh, Eric. We typically don't do that. We typically don't. So, he realized the need for an expert teacher. Barnabas said, okay, I know an expert teacher. I saw him. I talked to him. I defended him in Jerusalem. He's just right around the island. Not too far. So what does he do? He goes to Tarsus and finds Saul. And this is why you need to understand all of this happened in that 5-year period. A lot. But it was enough time to develop it so that Saul could do his work and do what God wanted him to
在5
do.
年当中，这当中发生很多事情，足以让扫罗后来出现，然后来做这个。
Okay, let's look at 11:26 and see what Saul's reaction was when Barnabas found him in Tarsus.
我们看26节扫罗的反应哈，他说找着了就带他到安提阿去，他们足有1年的功夫和教会一同聚集，教训了许多人，门徒称为基督徒，却从安提阿取手。
Did Saul go, I don't think so. I don't want to go to Antioch. What does the scripture say about this? He went. He just did it. And sometimes that's all we need to do. If God's laying upon our hearts to do something, we just need to do it and find the support. And that will help us. And that's what happens here. Because Saul willingly goes with Barnabas back to Antioch. And this is the now we're getting to the part that gives me the heebie-jeebies, or it just makes me really excited. All of this happened because God allowed it to, and and the people on earth saw God working and joined Him and did these things. And so what did he do? Barnabas and Saul meet with the church for 1 year. I would love to know what kind of conversations they had for a year. Because from that 1 year period, we have a defining moment in all of Christendom, or for Christians. In Antioch, there are some major things happen that we go by today. And that is the firm belief that we should send missionaries out. We should go forth.
在安提阿里面出现了一个非常重要的一件事情，就是我们要把宣教士派扬出去，然后去传扬福音。
You're gonna find that these people at Antioch were full of care and concern for all the Christians throughout the world.
他们在安提阿这些基督徒是非常照顾在世界各地的基督徒。
And you're gonna find when people are in need, it's the church in Antioch that does it.
你看安提阿是非常去帮助那些需要的教会。
And guess who was there at the beginning?
谁在那里先开始？
Saul and Barnabas, the encourager. I mean, I would really like to talk to Barnabas now that I've studied a lot. Okay, I want to know, how did you get your happy mood all the time? Where did you find the knowledge to say, Saul is telling the truth, I'm going to defend them to the Jerusalem church? And I got to see what God was working in Antioch before anybody else did, and I went and got Saul of Tarsus and brought him back. That's pretty amazing. So let's look at God brings His purpose together. So let's look at this. We have Barnabas, that we know is the encourager. We have Saul, the teacher, right? Because Barnabas went and got Saul to come and teach this church for a solid year before anything else happened. And this is the equation. It furthered God's kingdom. That's what it did. It multiplied greatly because these two men joined and did what God wanted them to do. Now, how exciting.